Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Wisdom Seed Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Moriarty, and today we're talking to Dr. Varun Khanna, a professor of Sanskrit. We explore how ancient practitioners understood Sanskrit as vibrations that directly create experience. That's pretty wild. And break down what our familiar mantras mean, like me, if you're mumbling through Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate bodhi svaha and you don't know what you're saying. We actually talked through it in this, and I found it actually really fascinating and came away being very interested in Sanskrit, which, to be honest, I didn't expect going in. We had this discussion with Dr. Varun, and his student Sagar was there, and Michael, Karen, Susanna, and also our community on Zoom. So enjoy. Hey, everybody. We have a professor of Sanskrit. Yes?
Hi. Yes, that is right.
You have your microphone. Yes. And one of his students, Sagar, who's pursuing a PhD.
Yes, that's right. A PhD in Buddhist philosophy at Princeton.
Nice. Okay. I'm Bill. Everyone knows me except Tatfu. And we have Michael Carroll and Susanna Lack. If you want to lean in and wave, they own the place. And if you haven't been to one of these, this is not a lecture. This is a discussion. So we have our circle of chairs, and the Zoom, y'all continue it so we can see you all very clearly, and hopefully you can see all of us very clearly. So something that I picked up is that something about Sanskrit is about the sound of it is actually incredibly important. Let me just stop talking already and please ask you to be.
Sure. Okay. Where to begin? The origin story of Sanskrit, I guess. This is really this is kind of the central anchoring story that makes, that basically makes Sanskrit what it is, I guess, for future generations, is that the people who developed Sanskrit once upon a time, they were, sitting in their seat of deep meditation, and they discovered that the universe is made up of vibrations. And upon discovering that the universe is made up of vibrations, they understood that every experience that they can have is part of this universe and therefore is also a vibration. And they take these vibrations and they make them into the roots of what we now call as Sanskrit. And so when you speak a Sanskrit word, then for them, it is basically reproducing the same vibration that is present in and through all of the experiences that you can have. And therefore, the word itself becomes a representation of the experience in the same way that the physical experience is also a representation of the experience, if you will. So when you speak a word, what you're doing is you're recreating the same experience that you're talking about without necessarily having the object in front of you. So for example, this is my favorite example to give, is a chair. It is, when you say the word chair in English, right, then it is this set of sounds, ch, a, r, that we've all agreed refers to this type of object. That when you close your eyes and you think of the word chair, the picture that comes into your head is something that has a seat, a back, 4 legs, maybe it's wooden, maybe if you're fancy, it's got like 6 legs and wheels, But that type of object is what we have all agreed is being referred to when we say the word chair. And then, of course, you get into the specifics of this chair and that chair and whatever. But that image that comes into our mind is referred to by the word chair. When it comes to the Sanskrit, the way in which they approach saying the word for the thing is, the word for a chair in Sanskrit is asandaha, or I should say a word for a chair is asandaha in Sanskrit. And this word comes from 2 roots. And I think of roots as like Lego bricks that you can just put together and create these castles. And so the 2 roots of this are asana, I guess you can say, which of course, if you've ever taken a yoga class, means posture. And da means one who gives. So the one who gives or protects your posture is called a asana. And so suddenly, when you say this word and you understand it through its roots, rather than understand it as a reference to the object, then the word itself contains the object. Or you can say the experience of the object. And so for these old Sanskrit folks, what they were doing was they were producing, or in their minds it was, they were discovering a vibrational representation of the entire universe that you could therefore tap into in order to access the entire universe also. Which is why when you recite a mantra, for example, what you're doing is you are producing an experience through your words that if you meditate upon it and if you tune your mind correctly, becomes the source of an experience you can have, even if you don't have a physical object in front of you. So the mantra is what I would call a little linguistic capsule that when you activate it, it becomes a vehicle for experience in the same way that actually sitting in a chair is a vehicle for an experience of sitting or having some kind of posture. And so the words do the same thing as the objects for them. And that's why saying the words, reciting, and especially reciting it correctly, is a very important thing for the development of Sanskrit.
So this is, oh man, someone, I could just drop the mic and walk out. That's incredible. But so this is why Trungpa Rinpoche, maybe, thank you, Matt, said he was very interested in his students pronouncing these correctly, as opposed to however maybe he grew up.
For sure.
So let's do this one. So I've said this a lot. I think a lot of us have said this a lot from the Heart Sutra. Om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi svaha. Sorry. So what am I intended to be invoking here?
Okay, it's a wonderful question. And
Do you need this?
no, but
Okay.
I'll hold it, just for effect. So, okay, so you have this mantra, which is made up of all these different words, and all the different words, and because this is a mantra, it is not meant to function the way that ordinary language functions. So although the principle is the same, a mantra as a linguistic capsule is always this very, very cryptic set of sounds that you are reciting that holds a lot more meaning than the sum of its parts, if you will. And so when you recite this mantra, so Om, of course, this is and I can talk a little bit about Om if you're interested. Okay.
We all know what it means. Yeah.
Okay, well, get this.
A good one to tell us about.
Okay, get this, you guys. Here we go. When these people discovered that the universe is made up of vibrations, they also discovered a small problem, which was that when I say a word, in order for that vibration to exist, it has to have a kind of platform for it to stand on, right? So like, for example, when you think about what a vibration actually is, a vibration is a movement. It's an action. It's an oscillatory movement, right? And in order for such a vibration to exist, it needs a substratum, some kind of platform, such as when we're speaking, you need air. If you don't have air, you can't have sound. That's why there's no sound in space. So you need some kind of platform. In order for me to move from here to the door, I need the floor. And so similarly, for a word vibration to exist, it needs a kind of substratum. And that substratum, which is also part of the universe, must also be a vibration. And that vibration needs also a platform. And that must also be a vibration. And so you have this philosophical problem of infinite regress that results from saying that a word is a vibration or that the universe is made up of vibrations because they're not standing on anything. And so it's the turtles all the way down, right? You got turtles standing upon turtles, and then you look for the bottommost turtle, and of course you can't find it. And so what these guys do is first of all, they say, if it were true that there is no final substratum, then everything we are perceiving around us would simply not be there. There is a whole philosophical school of thought that accepts this, and some might call it Buddhism. But, but for the old Sanskrit grammarians and philosophers, and especially the people who were writing the Upanishads, right? This is kind of where this philosophizing about language comes about for the first time in a very modern way, you can say. They postulate some kind of eternal vibration that sits at the bottom of all other vibrations that is infinite in nature and therefore doesn't need to stand on anything because of its infinitude, and becomes the substratum for all other vibrations. And that vibration is given the name Om. And because of its infinitude, it can't have any boundaries. And because it can't have any boundaries, that also means that all the other vibrations that we think of, such as chair or floor or tree or computer or whatever, are actually also pervaded by this infinite Om vibration. And therefore, those things are also nothing but Om in the form of a computer, in the form of a chair, in the form of a person, and so on and so on. And so when we invoke the symbol Om, what we're doing is basically invoking or calling into our consciousness this kind of interconnectedness of everything vis-a-vis Om as the as that kind of infinite vibration. And so when you meditate on Om, then according to the kind of old grammatical philosophy, what you are doing is, in the same way that you meditate on a chair and you have the experience of a chair, when you meditate upon Om, what you're doing is you are trying to have the experience of everything. And so it becomes this powerful invocation that sits at the beginning of all these mantras, because it is like a kind of activator symbol, you can say, for a mantra to have the power that it has. So, okay, so that's about Om. There's more to the story.
This is wonderful. So my question is about Om, that a human body expresses Om in a certain way. And I'm wondering if the ancient Sanskrit people went Om, and why they chose that. Is there a
That's
reason
an amazing
for that?
question. Yeah. Yes.
With the nadis and vayus of the body, even.
What part of the body?
Wouldn't know about this.
Well, there's two approaches to this. One is the grammatical approach, which is of course my area, and that kind of sits underneath a lot of different approaches. But there's also the sort of physical vibrational approach as well. So the grammatical approach is this, and this is something you can find in an Upanishad called the Mandukya Upanishad, which is all about parsing Om. And so in that Upanishad, what it says is that Om is made up of three parts. It's made up of the sound A, the sound U, and the sound M. And when you say it, and A and U are sitting next to each other, then because of Sanskrit grammar rules and all that stuff, they combine with each other to make O. That's just like a normal thing that happens in speech. If you were to say the letter A and you hold it out, and then you slowly convert it into the sound U. So if we were to then, and you cut it in half, then the sound that is there in between A and U is O. And so that's how you get the sound O, right? And so, but in any case, these three sounds represent the three different states of consciousness. That is the waking world, the dreaming world, and the deep sleep world. And they also represent the three different kinds of substance. So like the physical substance, the subtle substance, and then like the, you can call it like the seed substance. And the silence that happens between the recitations of Om it represents what they call as like the fourth state, or the enlightened state. The state that has access to all of the three other states, the state without which these three can't be pronounced. That is the grammatical approach. And then the kind of physical approach is that when you meditate on any object, something as mundane as a chair, right? Then that meditation yields this sound, asandaha, for example, right, that we were talking about before. But underneath that, it yields yet another sound, which is Om. And they say that this Om sound is sitting underneath all of the other sounds. The more you meditate on them, the more that Om sound reveals itself through those things. And the recitation of Om, the pronunciation of Om, is said to basically have this kind of effect of connecting you with all the stuff around you. So when you say Om, the vibrational effect that happens in your body is said to be one that is, the reason it connects you with everything around you is obviously because everything around you is also connected with that Om. So even as you're looking at a tree, as you're reciting Om, what it's supposed to do for you is to connect you with not just the tree, but everything around you. So those are a couple of approaches that people take when talking about Om. We didn't make it very far in the mantra yet, but there's more to the story that has to do with the relationship between Om and Dharma, and maybe I talk about that after. I'd love to actually get through the mantra today. Sure. So you say Om, it invokes this kind of interconnectedness. It invokes your ability to, produce the effect of the mantra that you are chanting. And of course, this mantra is also said in like togetherness with other people too, right? It's said in a congregation as well. And part of what Om does, especially when it's chanted together as in a congregation setting, is it connects you with the other people in the congregation too. And it's supposed to amplify the effect of the mantra as well. That if we're doing it together, like imagine you're playing in a band, right? And there's like three different flutes. It's a concert band, not a rock band. And there's three different flutes, and they're playing the same part, but they're not exactly totally in sync. Then while it sounds nice, it doesn't have the full effect as it would if they're like exactly in sync. And so the Om has that effect of like syncing you up, basically. Okay, then we get to gate, finally. And so gate comes from the root gam, which means to go, to move, to travel. And so these two gates are talking about moving from, essentially, it's like the movement from where we currently sit, that is this normal transactional world, whatever, towards this kind of enlightened state. That's where we're moving. That's where the mantra is taking you. That's what it's referring to. And so gate has to do with going from this particular, experience of our duality, experience of our like day-to-day world, and moving towards an experience of the interconnectedness of all things, the interweb of all things. Paragate has to do with moving beyond, like let's say you move up and you get a bird's eye view of that web. The word para means beyond. And so paragata or paragam, you can say, has to do with going beyond, or moving outside of the confines of the web itself, seeing the web for what it is. Parasamgate is a very interesting word. because it has, at least to me, it has two different senses. Some in the middle of that word is a prefix, which means good, and it also means together. So when you say sangam, then it means moving well, but it also means moving together. And so parasamgata means moving like totally beyond, I guess you can say. That is what the sum does for it. But it also means moving beyond it together. And I think that it holds both senses inside that word. So, of course, the role of a translator is to try to pick one word to for a word to mean, but the role of a commentator is to try to tell you all of the different meanings of that word and let you hold all of them inside yourself. So I'm being commentator today, not translator. And then, of course, bodhi has to do with the state of enlightenment that one reaches upon going totally beyond our like individual perspective and seeing this kind of total web for what it is. And svaha is also a really interesting word. Svaha is conventionally used as a word to simply be like a kind of ending pronouncement. That's like svaha, like it is done, let it be. You know, I have said it, I have said what I said, svaha, it's done. But the sort of origin of this word, so the word aha means calls. So like if I were to call, like say I'm calling Sagar, I'm like Sagar, that is aha. I have called Sagar, and the prefix on this is su, which means good or well. And svaha actually happens to be the wife of the god of fire. And the reason why she is the wife of the god of fire is because fire is the messenger of the gods. Fire is the thing into which you sacrifice, and the sacrifice then becomes smoke, which then rises upwards into the heavens or whatever, and the gods feed on the stuff you sacrificed in the form of that smoke. And svaha is the movement of the smoke from the fire to the gods. And that is the one that actually calls the gods to give you whatever it is that you asked for, which is why you invoke svaha at the end of a mantra. So it's like, I have asked for this thing, svaha, now go and get it for me, is kind of the meaning of svaha at the end of a mantra like that, is to basically call the fruit of your mantra upon yourself.
I've heard it translated in the West as "so be it." Is that? It doesn't feel like that's a good translation from what you're saying.
I would say technically no. Right. But you see, a technical answer is never enough, is never everything. So technically no, but practically of course. That's how it feels when you say it, right? That like, okay, so let it be this, what I have just mantrified. And that mantra that I have just recited is basically invoking my own path to enlightenment. So svaha is like, let it be the case that I achieve this final bodhi state. But the depth of it is.
I like your
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of ask two things. The first one is, it's very interesting. You've given an Upanishadic, basically, analysis of a Buddhist mantra.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about...
Why?
Well, yes, why? Why?
Yes.
Why you've just given an Upanishadic interpretation of a Buddhist mantra, and about what the relationship is between, to the extent that you know, the Buddhist thought about mantra, and say Upanishadic thought about mantra, or even grammatical thought about mantra. And the second thing that I wanted to ask you was, maybe after that, is if you could talk a little bit about how in the grammatical tradition or in the Upanishadic tradition, the word mantra itself is understood, because the Buddhists have their own nirukta for it, their own analysis of the word, which is that it's related to to man and to trai. That is the word meaning mind and the word meaning protect, that a mantra somehow protects the mind. And there are various other analyses of this. But I imagine maybe a similar one exists too in the Upanishadic context, but there's lots of ways even of just understanding the word mantra. So if you could talk about this word mantra.
Excellent question. Okay.
In the grammatical or Upanishadic context.
Yes, both questions are great. Here you go, thank you. Okay, because the Upanishads are Buddhist. No, okay. Let me not.
Okay, that's a hot take.
No, it's a hot take. No, that's no. The reason why the interpretation I'm giving is from the perspective of like the Sanskrit grammatical tradition is because all of these folks are talking to each other all the time. There's thousands of years of discussion and dialogue that goes into the formulation of these final kind of like things that we come to know now today. And that thousands of years of discussion and dialogue yields fruit on both sides. And they're not actually two sides, finally. So they may disagree philosophically on a ton of stuff, especially the ontology, the epistemology, but they're drawing from the same kind of pot of like linguistic philosophy. And so when you get a kind of grammatical analysis of this stuff going, it kind of sits underneath. And the reason I give the analysis the way I do, which is to give the grammatical analysis, but then say that the lived expression of the thing is sort of maybe more, true, if you will, than the technical explanation. But I like to give the technical explanation because I find that it adds some kind of depth to our lived experience of the mantra as well. Once you know it, you're like, oh, cool. Like there's a way to think about it that goes beyond simply a translation I have heard. But that grammatical explanation still nevertheless sits underneath, the way in which we come to understand it today too. Like there's a relationship between that and the way we come to know it today. As far as the mantra question, the same exact explanation that you just gave is the same exact explanation you will find even in grammatical literature about mantras, which is mananat trayate. And so it comes from the root man, which means to think or to contemplate. But here's the thing. There is one phrase which is just like manaha trayate, which has to do with it trayate, tra meaning to protect, right, as you're saying, and manaha meaning the mind. So it protects the mind or it protects your contemplative power. But another etymology of this, or another way to phrase that same sentence, is to say mananat trayate, which means it protects you from thinking. Mm-hmm. And so when you recite a mantra, the point is that to think it is to already miss the point of the mantra. The mantra is not for thinking, the mantra is for protecting your mind from doing the thing that takes you away from what the mantra is trying to give you, which is the experience of this kind of higher state. The more you think about it, the further you get from that thing, I guess, or that experience.
And we have an audience. Can you ask your question?
I just heard the word Upanishadic and I didn't know what it meant.
Oh, yes. Okay, so there is a set of texts that sits at the sort of at the heart of like the Hindu traditions today, and that is called the Vedas. And these are texts that are full of mantras that are about various things. These mantras are about things like, please give us rain. They're about things like, please give me a child. They're things like, please destroy my enemies. And these various mantras are accompanied by different like ritual practices, which are in the form of building a fire and sacrificing stuff into the fire so that the gods may be pleased with your sacrifice and they might hear your mantra that you've just recited and give you the thing that you wanted. Because I guess the idea for them was, in order to get something, I have to give something first. And so later in that tradition, this is like, we're talking like 5,000 years ago, 3,500 BCE is like we're a long, long time ago. But a long time into that tradition, what happens is people start being dissatisfied with this approach to doing stuff, where it's like, okay, my life can't just be ruled by these rituals that may or may not finally grant me the thing that I asked for, because I guess it was an observable phenomenon that it didn't always work. My enemies don't always get destroyed when I do this thing. And so the kind of response to this particular way of approaching life was to say, well, maybe there's something beyond the hope or the belief in the efficacy of the ritual for getting me the thing that I want, which is some kind of release from the suffering associated with not having what I want. And so what they concluded was, actually, maybe the release from the suffering is the thing I want, not the thing that I think gives me the release from suffering. And thus were born a set of texts that sit at the philosophical end of the Vedas called the Upanishads. And the Upanishads are these, well, sometimes short, sometimes not so short, texts that are basically about how do I achieve a kind of eternal happiness that doesn't fade after my particular ritual mantra was satisfied and I didn't get something else. How do I get a kind of happiness that doesn't fade with time? How do I get a kind of happiness that transcends the inevitability of death? So these Upanishads are these kind of philosophical, texts or musings or declarations, really, that kind of challenge the importance or challenge the finality of the rituals and the associated mantras, and they provide a way of thinking about life that is about like achieving a kind of happiness that transcends death, which is for them like the ultimate like end, So that's what the Upanishads are, and they are like these philosophical texts that have been the source of discussion and dialogue among all the like various philosophical schools that emerged from the subcontinent, that they become like things that people refute or agree with or qualify, so they become a kind of touchstone or a reference point, at least. And then for later like Sanskrit grammatical philosophy, they draw upon the Upanishads as well for like formulating their ideas about language too.
Let me do one. I know Michael's question. I wanted to ask Matt, who will probably get bigger when he unmutes, is a co-founder of the Wisdom Seat. And Matt. Is on, he doesn't look like it right now, but he's on a 3-year retreat. So this particular 3-year retreat, designed by Trungpa Rinpoche, he'll correct me on the timing, but it's something like a year in, year out, year in, year out, like that. And this is so helpful to me because I'm not alone. I know this. I know what goes on. I'm one of the people that gets to this part in one of these chants. It goes, Om Bhajavar, Om. And then as it goes on, I'm like, mumble, mumble, mumble. Don't know what I'm saying. Gather all sarva, gather. Okay. So it's helpful to hear that it's a bit more about the embodiment of what that sound is, but that would be helpful to learn what these mean. Matt, I wanted to ask you if you have something to say about it, because you seem to know a bit about this, and I think you probably just spent a whole lot of time chanting.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that you're doing a 3-year retreat, because it's very wonderful that people today are still trying to become siddhas, and especially North Americans are trying to do that. I think that's really amazing. So it's very wonderful to hear.
Thank you very much for what you're presenting tonight. And in regards to mantra, it's how we do with non-conceptual mind. And I think the explanation of Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate describes that because it's from the Prajna Paramita of emptiness. Actually, it's the second turning of the wheel of the Buddha. So I think it's more on the vibrational quality. And there's another term used, dharani. And my understanding of that word is that there's really no explanation. It's just it's a lot of Sanskrit sound without any real, you couldn't break down what these words are. In the Japanese Vajrayana tradition, there's a lot of dharani, but it's how one kind of cuts through conceptual mind and just being with and opening.
Thank you. Mary, what would you like to say?
Thank you for discussing this mantra. I really appreciate the insights that you have about the various meanings and its experience. I was in a program years ago with a meditation teacher, and one of the students asked, well, if these mantras, need to be recited, why aren't they in English or Tibetan or some other language that has more meaning for people who are reciting them? And the teacher said, I think they're in Sanskrit because that's the sacred experience of chanting these. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that people explain why they're in Sanskrit for two reasons. One is that actually it's helpful not to know what it means. Because as soon as you know what it means and you're like immersed in the meaning of the thing, you start thinking about it. And as soon as you start thinking about it, then you lost the power of the thing. And the second reason why people say that it's in Sanskrit is because of this belief that people have in like the magical power of Sanskrit itself. That by chanting it in Sanskrit, you're invoking a particular power that Sanskrit uniquely has. That's not to say that like English words, for example, are not also connected to roots and potential, like for example, the word chair is also connected to the Sanskrit root sheen, which means to recline. That upon which one reclines is a chair. So it's connected, but I guess the difference people would explain is that the Sanskrit roots are kind of just like naked in front of your eyes as so they're just like so deeply connected to the meanings, in a way that's not removed at all. There's no degrees of separation. And so chanting it in Sanskrit has this like particular effect. My take on that is that the perception of some kind of divine power that Sanskrit has resulted in a lot of like hierarchization of human beings into those who know it and those who don't know it. And that becomes like a foundational cornerstone for the construction of things like the caste system and stuff like that. And so when I get that explanation, then I always kind of feel like, I don't know that's like, I want that to be something that I'm like really resting on because and this has been part of my experience as being a Sanskrit teacher, is that when I walk into a space and I say I know Sanskrit, then I can feel the hierarchy suddenly being created, and I know where that comes from, and I understand that there's like people have this like perception of the divinity of Sanskrit, but actually it really is kind of a language like other languages. It just happens to have its own unique features. But when we ascribe a divinity to it, then we get into these like weird power dynamics. And so part of my project is actually deconstructing those power dynamics. So, and like understanding the history of how, especially like Western academics like myself, I guess, and also throughout the kind of traditional lineages of learning Sanskrit, how people have been have been participating in the construction of these hierarchies through their transmission of Sanskrit, whether it is as a teacher or whether it is as a student, and the spaces that get constructed around Sanskrit that end up being somewhat exclusive. And so my project is called Sanskrit for Mere Mortals for this reason.
What is it called again?
Sanskrit for Mere Mortals.
When you say project,
Yes.
can you say a little more about what that is? Because I think
Okay. It's both in terms of my academic work. So my research work has to do with the way in which Sanskrit has been received and transmitted through the lineages that reach us today, like me teaching Sanskrit at Swarthmore. So that's my academic work. And then my sort of beyond academic work is it's a platform, it's an online platform that I'm creating for teaching Sanskrit in a way that is maybe I like to think of it as somewhat more responsible, I guess, that is about actually learning it. First of all, learning it in a way that's much easier than the pedagogies of Sanskrit that exist in our circles right now, which make Sanskrit very difficult and are very open about how difficult it is. So if you read the introduction to any of the modern Sanskrit primers, somewhere in there they will always say Sanskrit is very difficult. But my approach is that it's not at all difficult and doesn't have to be difficult at all. It just has to do with the way in which you're introduced to it, and the way, and of course the quote unquote difficulty of Sanskrit is also part of creating that aura around Sanskrit, which basically means that the person who becomes the teacher has gone through some trials and tribulations to make them more special than you. So what I'm saying is that it's not like that at all. It doesn't have to be like that at all. And that's why I'm calling it Sanskrit for Mere Mortals. It's also a platform where people who have historically not had the opportunity to study Sanskrit on account of their caste status, on account of their gender status, on account of their class status, are able to come and learn it in a safe and inclusive environment. So it's sanskritformeremortals.com.
So all that you've said, Varun, makes me actually, well, you might be happy to know that in the Buddhist context, in discussion about mantra, there actually is quite a bit of discussion about what language mantras are in the Indian Buddhist context. And because obviously some of them clearly have Sanskrit words in them, like Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate bodhi svaha. But a lot of them, it really is unclear. You see, for example, in texts defending the practice of Buddhists using mantra from Buddhists who say, why are you using mantra? That they say, these interlocutors say, we shouldn't say mantra because these mantras are just nonsense. They're not in any language. And you see various defenses, including, for example, maybe they're just not in a language that you know. They could be in a language of devas or yakshas, for example. Sure. They're in some other language. Or maybe they just are not sentences. They're some other thing. You also see in Dharani manuals, sometimes mantras will be given a name like, it'll be like, oh, if you want to achieve this goal, recite this Dravida mantra, as if it's actually a Dravidian language mantra. And then the sounds will be a little bit different and there won't be any Sanskrit words in them. I think that this relates, and this actually, there's something I want you to talk about. But I think that the reason why Buddhists are open to saying maybe mantras aren't in Sanskrit is because two reasons. One of them is because one of the main Buddhist views of Sanskrit is that Sanskrit actually is just another conventional language, just like any other language. This is one of the main Buddhist takes on what Sanskrit is. And the other reason is that one of the main takes on what a mantra is a mantra is an empowered formula that a deity, in the Buddhist context, the deva is of course a bodhisattva or a Buddha, has empowered through their power, really. The technical word in Sanskrit is adhishtana bala, but through that adhishtana bala, their power to make things be a certain way, they just consecrate certain strings of sounds, and then they establish what's called a samaya, which of course people in Vajrayana Buddhism will be familiar with this word samaya, or as North Americans often say it, samaya. Yeah, a samaya is the conditions under which that consecration has established, such that if those conditions are met by a person who recites the mantra, that is, if they are a holder of that samaya, then an effect is achieved through the power of the deity by reciting the mantra.
Which means it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter
Sanskrit.
it doesn't matter if it's in Sanskrit or not. All that matters is that the deity consecrated it. And so there could be mantras in any language. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's often said that, for example, that karmapa kena is a mantra. That it could be that the karmapas consecrate, even though karmapa kena is a Tibetan sentence, that the karmapas are the type of siddhas who can consecrate language too, just like the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, just like Shakyamuni and so on. And they consecrated karmapa keno, even though it's a Tibetan sentence. I think in Japanese mantric Buddhism, there's a similar thought about the phrase, the Japanification of the phrase Namo Mitabhaya Buddhaya, which is Namo Amida Butsu, which is just that Amitabha makes that have a certain power. It's words that he makes have a certain power. And if there's and where I want to get to this, what I want you to talk about is there's a devotional aspect to this. There's a devotional aspect in that Buddhism is a devotional religion. It holds that there are people who have qualities that make them pujaniya or worthy of worship. And one of those qualities is power. And mantras are an expression of their power. And it's power that's unified with love and compassion. So it's a compassionate exercise of their power. So on that view, I think, especially for many Buddhists for whom reciting a mantra is not necessarily connected with any samaya or anything like that, but it's simply a matter of, well, this mantra is associated with this person to whom I have devotion in my heart. That's often the way people relate, Mahayana Buddhists relate to the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. It's almost a devotional practice of the deity Avalokiteshvara, who's seated over there, because of that mantra being the mantra that Avalokiteshvara's power and compassion empowered. What's the relationship between mantra and devotion, which I think is very relevant for Buddhists insofar as Buddhism is a devotional religion and mantra is so tied up with devotion in Buddhism?
Yeah, I mean that's a wonderful question, and I think you can keep the mic. But I think that's a really excellent point, and one of the like kind of foundational tenets of Buddhism is that we are not beholden to some kind of like revelatory we're not beholden to some kind of revelatory text like the Vedas, and therefore to the language of the Vedas either. And therefore, when we think of a mantra, Sanskrit is not, like it's not important that it be in Sanskrit, but it depends on which tradition you're a part of. For some traditions, it is important that it is in Sanskrit, and for others, it may not be. But for those for whom it's not that important that it's in Sanskrit, what matters is the connection of this particular set of sounds to the deity. It might as well be some, like I don't want to say it might as well be Sanskrit in the sense that like, oh, it's all Latin to me kind of thing, right? It might as well be something that holds this like divine power, which of course it does, and that is totally okay. The difference between the Buddhist practice of doing this and considering something to have divine power,
because a deity made it so, and people who believe in the divinity of Sanskrit as like inherently as a language, is that nobody asks you your caste before you learn Tibetan, for example, or learn this like particular set of sounds. But when it comes to learning Sanskrit, the first thing you're asked about is what is your caste? What is your, what is your like background that makes you eligible for learning this language, which inherently has divine power that then confers upon you a kind of divinity by learning it. And so the difference, I would say, the thing that makes the Buddhist practice that you're describing possible is that it has attempted, or not attempted, but just probably by virtue of just movement away from, areas where things like caste are such an important part of people's identity. It has basically eschewed the element of eligibility to learn the thing, but it hasn't eschewed the element of eligibility to receive the fruits of the thing, which is the samaya concept. Right. That like, but Buddhist samayas are not. Oh, sorry. Buddhist samayas don't. I forget the word. The root and branch samayas of Buddhist tantras are not. They don't make reference to caste. Some of them make reference to gender, but they're not. It's not as though in order to receive this abhisheka and be a samayadhara, a holder of samaya for this particular deity, you have to be of this caste or that caste or another in the Buddhist context.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a
The one thing I would say, one little nuance is in our deity practice, it's non-theistic. Right? There is fundamentally no deity.
right.
That there is a process of devotional engagement that reconstructs your confused mind so that it opens to the awakened state through these skillful means. And the quality of the deity reflects the awakened elements that are already inherent or latent in the experience, versus a deity is giving me the goodies.
Right.
I'm going to do the goodies, and the deity and I are going to have some fun together, and ultimately I'm getting somewhere.
Yeah.
That's not a Buddhist tantric approach.
Of course. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. And that is exactly why when you recite the mantra, like from the Buddhist practice perspective, when you're reciting the mantra, what you're connecting with, what you're engaging with is not some kind of like, it is still a kind of linguistic capsule. It is still kind of trying to deliver a particular experience, but you're not necessarily engaging with like requesting something from somebody else somewhere that's like, that's like sitting up there like granting you this thing, because the capsule itself is the container of the experience, which makes perfect sense. And so it doesn't like, as far as the Sanskrit question is concerned, therefore, it doesn't necessarily matter that it be in Sanskrit or not, as long as that thing is like consecrated with that power. But so to add to that just a tiny bit, when somebody then gives an interpretation of a mantra or creates a mantra and says like, hey, this word has this particular like significance and this particular meaning and all that stuff, it is an exercise in like constructing a reality around that word that then is designed to deliver a particular kind of feeling for you as the devotee. And it doesn't actually matter whether that word means that thing or has that or has any kind of inherent quality about it. It is something that is constructed for the purpose of helping you to achieve a particular goal for yourself.
You know what that reminds me of is a funny remark that I found when I was reading about mantra in the writings of important Buddhist philosopher Dharmakirti. There's one interlocutor he entertains who says, if this is how mantra works, why is it that we see people who clearly are not yogis having some samaya, having success with mantra? And he says it's purely because of devotion to their guru. The guru, that they are so devoted to their guru, and their guru has the samaya. And purely because of that devotion, sometimes things happen even when these ordinary people say mantra.
Just through proximity to the guru's aura.
Yeah, to the guru's aura or something. Sometimes things happen. And what you said kind of reminds me of that. There's someone giving you something, and it's more about the relationship that you have with them that's facilitated by what they've given you than about what it is that they gave you.
And this is why in the like student teacher lineage traditions, there is always a point where the teacher says to the student, of course, first they build the whole story, right? They're like, look, this world is made up of these elements, and those elements came from this source, and this source came from this source, and so on and so on. And then in the end, the teacher tells the student, like, that's all just like a fabrication. For your understanding, it made sense to you for me to weave this story around you about the origins of the universe and things like that, because you were interested in that question. But in the end, this was a fabrication by me so that you could understand better, so that I could break the fabrication and, burst you into that enlightened state.
Yes. I want to say something that might not be clear. You are not a Buddhist practitioner.
No.
Okay. But very knowledgeable.
Nor am I a Upanishadic practitioner.
I want to make sure I help you a little bit here. SanskritForMereMortals.com.
Yes.
Do you have to be a PhD student to go to Sanskrit?
You have to be a mortal.
So for our group, we're all householders. We're having kids, right? We're doing things. Is that something they might consider looking at?
For sure, for sure. I mean, so Sanskrit for Mere Mortals is a platform not only for teaching Sanskrit, which of course I have like a whole schedule of like releasing courses starting from the alphabet all the way up to learning like, grammar and stuff like that. But it's also a place where you can learn other ancillary things. So I have a course on consciousness that I will also release pretty soon. And then there's courses on like the history and philosophy of yoga. There's courses on like mythology, so all of these various things can be found there. And in all of them, the approach is one of basically being, approaching it as a like critical academic person. But by critical academic person, what I mean to say is we're always connected to the histories of the transmissions of these topics. But that doesn't mean that it is not therefore helpful to you in your own practice, to learn like say mythological histories or to learn, about different philosophies of consciousness, different understandings of consciousness in like the Sanskritic world, So there's lots of ancillary courses as well, things that are, over the years, I or colleagues that I call in to teach on the platform have specialized in. And all of them are basically, they're taught in a very simple way for anybody to understand, but they also are at there's like a particular level that they're at as well, which I would call probably at a college level, Wow. So, yeah.
That's so good. And I want to make sure I say Kaya Fruckman is a student of Professor Varun and had the idea for this great talk and is working like 3 jobs. And so actually could not come tonight, but she fed us some topics and some questions. This was so much fun. We got very lucky that Sagar was here. Man, that fun, very fun to watch. Thanks everyone for coming. Would you like to say good evening? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is my first time here, but I love it. The vibes are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. You guys are great.
Thanks everybody.